Alright, so this is going to be a video on summarizing section 1, which was the introduction to vectors. So in engineering we have two types of physical quantities. We've got scalars and we've got vectors. So what we should know by now is for scalars, they're just a value. Ugh, terrible handwriting. Nothing beats good old pen and paper. But anyway, when I say just a value, that means that the value can be positive or it can be negative. And here I've used shorthand notation, but plus VE simply means positive and negative VE means negative. So what we also need to know is the magnitude of a scalar, and the magnitude of a scalar is basically the positive value is the magnitude and what this does is, and it tells us how big the scalar is. So a scalar is just a value, positive or negative. However, if we take the positive value, which could also be 0, that tells us how big the scalar is. Similarly then, we have vectors, and for vectors we have a magnitude and a direction. So magnitude and direction. And we already know what a magnitude is. A magnitude is the positive value of a scalar, more or less. But don't get it confused with a scalar. A scalar is not the magnitude. And so a vector has a magnitude and a direction. And the best way to explain this is probably through an example. So for scalars, an example that I can give is speed. So speed is just distance over time, and for example we can have a speed of 50 miles per hour, and that is an example of a scalar because it's only a value. There's no information other than the value. However, an example of the vector can be velocity, and that is terrible writing, so I'm going to do that again. But for velocity, we can have again 50 miles an hour, which is the magnitude, it's the amount, but we can have that 50 miles an hour due north. So then we've also got a direction, and that's basically what separates a scalar from a vector. Whereas a scalar purely just gives us information about the thing or the quantity, whereas a vector takes it one step further and says what that thing is doing. So we know that the vehicle is going 50 miles an hour, but we don't know so what. So what about that 50 miles an hour? Well, the velocity tells us that it's going 50 miles an hour due north, so it tells us where it's going. It gives us that extra information that allows us to take it further and analyze the situation. And that's basically the difference between scalars and vectors. And I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, just leave a comment below and I'll try to explain it in better terms, because I know this is a bit of an iffy explanation. Well, thanks for watching this video. It was a summary of the introduction to vectors. In the next video, I'll be going on to the basic concepts of vectors, which is kind of like an introduction, just it's the concepts, so it's going into more depth.